Fourth Line Fantasy Hockey Show. This is September 20th, 2018. With you today is myself, Carl, and Ben. Welcome back, Ben.
Thank you for having me once again. This is going to be exciting and a little bit different. I'm excited to see where this goes. Hopefully it turns out as well as we anticipate.
Yeah, I guess full disclaimer, this is as close to a live show as humanly possible right now. There is no safety net for us. We are going to be doing a mock fantasy draft tonight with some of our listeners. We're doing a 10-team draft, and we're going to be giving you our thoughts on the draft as it happens so that you can see kind of who we're taking, why we're taking them, our thoughts on some of the other picks that are happening, and just kind of get you up to speed. Now that the preseason's underway, some of your drafts are starting to happen.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. And there's a lot of information coming out, whether you take it as concrete details or info that you could draft your team around, or just lots of the times preseason it's experimental, and you see some of these guys they'll get some ice time, but they might not necessarily play. So, and that's a big thing. You may have these outliers in the NHL preseason where guys that might pique your interest, then you might be able to pick up late in rounds, or whether you have some faith in them and take them early rounds. And the big thing is guys like Rasmus Dahlin, like he's slipping now. He was before preseason, he was slotted around the 70th pick, I do believe is what NHL.com had him in. And now they're seeing his ADP, or his average draft position, is well over 100, which is surprising to me, but we'll have to see what plays out here.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this draft. We've got, right now in the draft, we've got Scott, Sean, Leonard, Ian, and obviously Ben and myself will see. Hopefully everyone can make it. Ben is picking 5th. I'm picking 10th. Full disclosure, we definitely fixed that. We wanted to give you a perspective on what it's like to draft in the middle of the first round and near the end of the first round. So near the end, we're going to, especially at the turn, what are your thoughts? I personally love picking at the turn is my favorite, right? Because you have solidified thoughts, right? You're not thinking who's going to be there for my next pick. You get 2 picks back to back. You don't have to question and rely on other people to make the picks you want to get your players.
Absolutely. I think picking last has its benefits, because at the same time, when you're playing Yahoo or something like this, you could honestly fill 2 position voids in the snap of fingers. Or you could go handcuff if you wanted to, or even like say in smaller leagues, the way it's playing out, you could very well get John Tavares and Austin Matthews if you're content on that. And that's the big thing, is you get 2 picks back to back, and you could target it any way, whether it's positional or categories. It's basically the world's your oyster at that point.
Exactly, yeah. So I guess before we get started with this, let's let everyone know if you were wanting to play fantasy with us this year. We're going to be getting our fantasy league set up. We're looking for a draft happening Sunday, September 30th. So Sunday the 30th, probably looking at 8 p.m. Eastern time, so the same time we're recording this right now. If you're interested, send us an email, mail at thefourthlinepodcast.com. Send us a DM on Twitter at fourthlinepodcast. We're on Facebook, facebook.com/thefourthlinepodcast. And let us know why we should pick you to be in the league. Every year we get some great reasons. If we laugh, that's always a perk. If you're convince us of your prowess, that's always good too. We like to have some folks that are new to the league. We always have some returning members. Usually the winner of the league gets an automatic entry. Problem is I won the league last year, so maybe I'll get an extra spot where I'll just pick someone. Dealer's choice. But then, yeah, so this draft's 18 seconds away from getting fired up. Obviously, I think we know who's going first off the board. And from then on, we will see.
And I'm excited to see. I was reading something earlier today. This is pre-draft sort of banter, but Brent Burns, they're saying that for me, he's the number 2 defenseman, especially with Karlsson. But the thing is are they going to run 2 defensemen on the first power play unit? Or are they going to sort of spread them out? Because having those, it seems almost overkill to have both on the ice at the same time. And that's going to cut into either one of their power play time. And that's a big thing in fantasy hockey.
Yeah, they're not going to be on the same power play, that definitely hurts. And they're playing tonight, so we'll see how their usage is for that. But from a fantasy perspective, certainly having, I think, the Karlsson trade as we've seen helps Brent Burns. We've seen. You're not able to just have, you can have him out against the second unit now if you want to, the first unit. I'm talking, obviously on the penalty kill or power play, you're not talking that, but like at even strength, that's where they can use them at. So, for me, I think this trade helps Burns. For Karlsson, it doesn't change my perspective on him. I think I'm not changing where I'm picking up Erik Karlsson based on this trade.
Oh, no, absolutely. And so I've got the 5th pick right now, and that was a misclick, but that's okay. Patrick Kane, I think even though he you could say he had a down season as of last year, but the thing is, like, he's a pure goal scorer. And that team, it's like we said in previous episodes, is they're going to have to score, and where's their scoring going to come from? They're still going to get off. They're going to still have that exposure to the power play, and they still have Taves and Kane. They have that chemistry. I don't think, sure, it might be a risky pick, but I think it's well worth it. And the fact that they have him projected at nearly 300 shots this year, so he's going to have to find the back of the net eventually. You can't shut him down the whole season.
No, so we're coming up to my pick, and like I said, I'm going to be having 2. My boy Nathan McKinnon is still sitting there on the board. And Ian took him right before me. So shout out to Ian for taking him. One thing that kind of frustrates me a little bit here, I'm thinking of going left wing, always super, super shallow. And he's a bit, it's a bit off from his ADP, but I'm really wanting to take Taylor Hall here. Will he have the same year as last year? Probably not, but as a left wing, it's him and Jamie Benn, and then a pretty big drop off, Goudreau, and then really not a whole lot after that. So I'm going to take Taylor Hall with that first pick, which leaves me with either Matthews, Tavares, Sagan to take at center. Again, center pretty deep. I think we talked about that on our last episode.
Yeah, we did. You have these single position eligible players that you could pick up really late, and it's sort of, you don't want to. It's such a backlog. There's plenty of players that are available that you could probably pick up later that are going to get that second unit power play time or even may play third line. It's just the best way about it, in my opinion, would go after, be like a guy, say, like Blake Wheeler, Jamie Benn, even if it may be a reach, but if you're in a position that you believe that there's the value there and it won't sort of fill your roster with these single or position eligible guys, I think it's well worth it.
Yeah. So I ended up going Austin Matthews. So against what you're talking about with the multiple eligibility guys, but again, at this distance, you're looking at Jamie Benn, Blake Wheeler, and then for multi-eligible position guys, there's really not a whole lot near the top of the draft. So certainly as we get a bit further, I'm probably not going to be going center as this continues on, because there's, for my next picks, I'm probably looking at probably just a left wing, right wing kind of a thing. I want to get some of those right wings filled in, because again, there's going to be a lot of centers as this draft carries on.
Oh, absolutely. And that's the little 13th, Jacob Voracek was off the board before Giroux, which is, I think, Giroux went 8th, sorry. But that's sort of a reach. I don't know if that's a handcuff. It very well could be a handcuff. Yeah, it is. So that right there, that's an excellent pick, I think, because you're going to have the exposure from power play and even strength, and there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to be on the same line. There'd be no reason not to have them there.
Yeah, I'm always, especially for my first 2 picks, I'm always hesitant to pick 2 guys from the same team. But you just went and you picked your namesake there.
Yeah, Jamie Benn. He's a multi-category guy. I think he may slow down on the hits. Last year I think he had 40 more hits than what his projection was for the last season, preseason projections, I suppose. But I believe Dallas is going to be firing on all cylinders. That team is stacked, and they're fairly deep. Even both the top 2 lines are going to be great this year. And power play specialists, and the fact that he's dual eligible, and it's not too much of a reach. The ADP is 16. Actually, Pete Jensen from NHL.com, in both his mock drafts, was taking him 5th and 6th, respectively, in their 2.0 and 3.0 versions.
There we go. So this is, one guy that I honestly debated, and if you look based on ADP, Pasternak dropped all the way to 18th in this. Going to a guy he had, that's one of the guys that's not here right now, so that's why I went to the ADP. That's one of the guys that couldn't make it. Auto draft. It seems like that's a bit of a drop for a guy, with wing eligibility to drop that far.
I think it is. And the Bruins are still, they didn't get any worse, but they do have some up-and-coming talent with Donato, and you have Jake DeBrusk. But at the same time, there's no way you're going to pull him off, granting injury, off that top line. He's going to play, say, a full season. I don't think he missed. I think he missed 3 or 4 games last season. So he's a reliable, healthy player, and playing with Bergeron and Marchand, I believe he'll continue to be a top producer. It doesn't make any sense that you drop that low.
Well, there you go. And we just saw, as you mentioned, Brent Burns, first defenseman off the board, with Erik Karlsson still sitting there.
Yeah, and now that you mentioned it, see, this is where I was, most of these drafts that I was doing, before this, the mocks, Karlsson was going fairly early, and I feel confident that I just took him now with the 25th pick, that it's a good thing to start filling out your D, especially these guys that are going to be power play heavy guys, even strength. I think the Sharks are going to score a lot of goals, and the back end is going to be a big producer of that. Even when Brent Burns wasn't scoring, he was still getting 6, 7, 8 shots a game, and just by numbers, you could either contribute to assists or you're scoring those goals.
Yeah, so it's my turn now at the turn, and like I said, I'm not going to be picking a defenseman or a center. I'm also not going to be picking a defenseman right now. The only defenseman worth picking went 2 picks before me, Victor Hedman. So it's I might actually. There's been the start of a run on goaltenders, and I don't like to be persuaded by runs. But I'm going to stick with what I said. I already took a left wing, and there's not a lot. It's Forsberg, Philip Forsberg, and then all the way down to like Evander Kane and Ehlers. I'm going to take Tarasenko with the first pick here. And then I'm going to go over to the goaltenders, and I'm sitting here with a thought between Holtby, Bobrovsky, and Rask. And I know that I've had an irrational love of Braden Holtby in the past. Last year, he did have that time where he lost the net a little bit. Bobrovsky's going to be given that opportunity to work through things. And in a league where we're working off of wins, no losses, I'm going Bobrovsky.
I think that's the safest pick, to be honest, because he's going to. Columbus was a defensively fairly stout team last year, and he put up monster numbers, even when games where he basically kept that team in games. He was the reason why they were winning games. And
absolutely.
I think he'll have another Vezina candidacy season, absolutely, barring injury, right? But he's as reliable in health-wise as any goalie in the league, to be honest.
Right, as reliable with health as any team could be. I trust Bobrovsky to get me what I need. So, and then as we're looking, you're coming up here. What are you looking for? So right now you have selected Jamie Benn with center left, Patrick Kane, and then Erik Karlsson. What are you looking at here?
I think at this point, if Tuukka Rask, I'm going to have to go with Tuukka Rask. It's just being able to touch on basically all 4 positions at this point when it comes to goalie, defense, center, and right wing. After that, you can sort of start filling it in. You don't necessarily have to draft a goaltender for another couple rounds that are going to get you 50 starts in a season. And the big thing is, like, you could pick up these guys like Brian Elliott or maybe Cam Talbot that may have not had the greatest season, but they could still have that potential to go streaking. And even Philly, I think that it's going to be a goaltender that's going to be really underlooked is Brian Elliott. He's carrying a injury tag as of right now, but a lot could change from here to the starting of the season.
Yeah, and that's a guy that I think if you're looking at Brian Elliott, you take him. We're doing a 16-team draft or a 16-round draft that's a guy that you can look to be taken near the end of your draft. And those are the guys that you assume are going to be dropped at some point in the year anyways. And so no matter what you do there, you're going to be safe. But looking at what we have transpiring now, and I don't know if this lines up with the other mocks that you've been in and some of the other leagues, a really big run on goaltenders. And for me, when I'm looking, like I said, I don't like to be dictated by runs. And honestly, it makes me go the other way. If there's a run on goaltenders, if there's a run on defensemen, I'm like, well, I guess I'm just not taking a defenseman right now. I'm not going to reach for someone. I'm just going to let the draft come to me. And that's a big part of what you do in this is figuring out what you're comfortable doing.
Yeah, and sometimes you sort of want to build a game plan, especially when you finally see that draft order. And you could sort of play off. Lots of people will just play off the rankings that either Yahoo or ESPN or whoever you play through provides you with. But most of the time, you have to take a tactical approach. But so I've got the 45th pick here, and might be a homer pick, it might not be, but this is definitely a bounce back pick. I'm going with Leon Draisaitl, another guy with dual eligible position for center and right wing. I believe the Oilers, there's no way they're going to be in the bottom for power play or opportunities this year. I don't know if last year was just poor coaching or just poor execution, but there's no way. Right now they've got 72 points as is projected with 20 power play points. That's about on pace of what he had in the 2016-2017 year. So if you come back, he's going to pay dividends again. You roll him out center, roll him out right wing, and the only downside is he's not going to get you the hits that you would from a guy that, say, Jamie Benn or even Mark Scheifele or Wheeler. But he's still a producer.
Yeah. Well, and the question mark there for me, and I know that it started to solidify a little bit for him last year, was the simple fact of where he's going to be playing. If he's playing, by the end of the year, he wasn't playing with McDavid. If he's playing with McDavid, his value skyrockets, right? He goes through the roof, and he suddenly becomes a very valuable piece on any team. On that second line, his value drops, an amount, certainly a non-zero amount. And for me, that's kind of where I'd be looking at it and saying, what is his usage going to be? Certainly, he's shown in the past that he can put up the numbers worthy of, at the very least, the 45th pick, which is where you took him.
Yeah, and that's the big thing. Sometimes you have these question marks that you sort of want to get answered, but it's almost taking a risk at that point. But you have to sort of weigh it out. Is it a bit will you get more of a benefit than a negative out of it? And I think this is a year that the Oilers, for me, I don't think they got any better. They didn't get any worse, but they didn't get any better. And with the Pacific growing and the way the trades that they made, it may look like he may or not produce, but you have to stick with it. So 57th pick here. I'm going with another player with dual eligibility. That's going to be a common thing for most of my picks here. I'm going with Nikolai Ehlers. Playing on a Jets team that is, I believe they're stacked. I don't think he's going to be playing first line because I think that's going to be, I think Kyle Connor is probably going to be slotted on there and Scheifele and then Wheeler, I do believe. But even so, he's going to get second power play unit time for sure. That's a guaranteed slot because I don't think there's anybody behind him that can challenge him for that. And also he contributes to all 5 or 6 categories here that we have in this current draft. Yeah.
And so for me, this on the turn, I picked Scheifele and Joe Pavelski. And Mark Scheifele, if this was a league we were playing out, I would say right now that is the pick that will define this team. That's the pick that will take me next level. When Scheifele was healthy last year, sure, he missed a significant amount of time, but before that injury, he was playing phenomenal hockey and was one of the top centers in the league. And so sure, he only has single eligibility, but what he does have is, like you said, that stacked Jets team. And we saw what that offense could do last year, and I fully believe and would be excited to have him again.
Oh, absolutely. And I think the Jets are going to be another team that I believe right now is an easy shoe-in for the playoffs. They're going to be scoring an incredible amount, and they had I forget what their power play percentage was, but it was a well-tuned machine. So I've got 65th pick. I'm going against lots of people. Doughty went 62nd, and that was about it for defensemen for the last 10 picks. But Roman Josi, the Preds, that's another team I believe is going to be incredibly strong, especially their back end. Lots of people were saying you could compare the Preds and the Sharks have a similar unit when it comes to the defense, but I think Josi is going to be that another. He's their number 2 guy, or even number 1, I would argue, against PK Subban. But I believe he's the pick here. He covers all 5. He covers the 6 categories that we have for this specific league, and plus the plus minus. That's a big thing that lots of people don't really evaluate, is the fact that is a category in most of these standard leagues.
Yeah. So in this league, it is for the league that we did last year, and probably the league we do again this year. It was not. And again, for the second time in this draft, my pick got taken right before I was going to take him. My plan here was to take PK Subban and a goaltender. And the goalies I'm equally as torn on. I'm leaning towards John Gibson. The reason that I'm only leaning towards him, I'm okay with Gibson as my second goalie, but the health problems with Gibson are a big issue. And so I did end up going Gibson, and I'm gonna hold off on the defenseman and go back up front. And again, this is the kind of draft where you, like all drafts, you let it come to you and you see what's happening. And so, I've got a lot of slots available up front, particularly the left wing. I am going to take, I'm torn on this one. I don't want a second Shark. I will take Matthew Tkachuk, even though I can't stand the guy. And that's the joys of having 45 seconds to pick guys. But yeah, so this is where I feel from here on out, I'm not going to like a lot of the players I'm picking, because you start to get in that realm. The stars are gone, and it's a lot of, question mark players. There's, if they were safe picks, they would have already gone. Looking at left wing there, other options in that realm, we had Huberdeau, Clayton Keller, who went right after, Travis Konechny went right after him, and Logan Couture. I know you talked about the fact of having multiple players on the same team. I tried to spread it out. One reason is scheduling. When it comes to scheduling, I like to make sure that I have as many guys who can play evenly every night. I don't want, if the Flyers, for example, the guy that took Giroux and Voracek, I don't want to have a week where the Flyers play 2 games and all of a sudden my top 2 picks aren't playing for me. And so in a weekly league, that's something that's an issue. If you're playing Roto or a full season league, that's not an issue, right? Scheduling, it becomes irrelevant, and that's a safer pick. But for me, I don't want to lose a week, because if in a tiebreaker, that's my thing. I'm like, well, I don't really want, if all things being equal, I'd rather have 2 guys from different teams.
And that's the big thing, is being able to have your positions completely full throughout the whole week. If it's a daily lineup set, you don't want to have an empty slot. That's just, even if the guy's not going to score you goals, you're still going to accumulate those stats that'll help towards your final categories after the week. And that's another thing that sort of goes hand in hand with having these dual eligible players. And something for me is incredibly important is you don't necessarily have to look at matchups, be like, so if you have 3 left wingers, who has a better matchup for this night? You could sort of be flexible and move players around where it needs be.
Exactly. And especially when you get, most leagues, and I would say if your league doesn't do this, you need to fix it. Talk to your commish. If you are the commish, then you have the power to fix it. You need to have weekly roster limits rather. I don't know what your preference is. I think 4 is a good number. Even 3 is fine. If you start getting into 5, 6, 7, that's letting me just use that last pick of the draft, those guys that I say are probably not going to be there. What I'm doing, if that's the option given to me, is I'm just picking guys there that I can slot into my IR position. I'm taking guys that are hurt so I can stash them on the IR, and then I'm going to just use those as streaming slots. I don't care who's there. I'm going to pick drop whoever is the least valuable to me, and rotate through that. And for those, those are going to be the slots where I'm going after shots and hits. Those high volume counting stats, the more reliable stats, those are the ones that you're not going to have as much fluctuation. It's hard. Even, Connor McDavid, he's a bona fide number 1 pick. he's probably going to score 1 out of every 2 games, but he's going to have 3 or 4 shots night in, night out. For a guy like, who would be a good example? Drew Doughty. He's going to get you 1 or 2 hits every night without a doubt.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's the thing. It almost, you have to be able to sort of stream your concentration to whichever categories, because sometimes most of these head-to-head weeks, it comes down to a single category. Not many times in fantasy do you absolutely blow someone out and shut them out in every single category. And that's the thing. You have to almost, if you come down to that predicament and you have to pick which player does what, you have to make the right choice and sort of attack one category at a time. So I had the 85th pick here, and I do not like doing this, but Barkov was still on the board. And granted, I believe he's a better defensive center than he is offensive, but he's still going to get you your power play time, because Vincent Trocheck is normally the number 1 guy when it comes to the power play. But with the projected stats, they have him at 73 this year for points in total, 24 goals, 49 assists, which is that's good enough for me, especially at that late in the draft. Guys that were on the board were, like I said, Vincent Trocheck, Braden Shen, Backstrom, and Braden Point. I believe Barkov, out of those 5 guys, has the highest upside.
Yeah, for sure. And so for me personally, it's my turn at the turn. I finally got my defenseman. I'm going John Carlson because I want that power play production out of him. And about 2 minutes after talking about the fact that I don't like to have guys from the same team, I'm strongly considering, again, even though I also say I don't want to have a plethora of centers, it is very hard for me not to pick Nicholas Backstrom staring me in the face right now. So unless I can find someone else to take with that pick, you know what? I'm going to take someone else with that pick, unless I get screwed by my computer here. There you go. I went Dougie Hamilton with that other pick. I think he's going to, I know he's going to have a good season in Carolina. It's a team with a lot of opportunity there, and I'm excited to see what he can do there. He's a guy that every year, I think, kind of in general, fantasy, it's a little harder to get underrated because you just look at the numbers and you're like, well, he's putting them up. I can't not pick him. But there you go. I went back-to-back defensemen, finally filled my first 2 defenseman slots.
And that's a big thing, too, is you have the usage. I think he's going to slot in and be a number 1 pairing without a doubt, and number 1 power play. And we've talked about it before, is teams are going to score goals. And that's the guy who's going to be part of it, quarterbacking the power play. It might take a little bit of time to get him used to the system and whatnot, but the guy, he did well in Calgary, and playing behind Giordano, he's a well-tuned and fine-tuned machine. And at that point, it's like you just slot him in, and he's going to be one of those defensemen where no matter where he goes in the league, he'll produce. So we've got the 96th pick here, and at this point, there's plenty of single eligible players. I'm going to take a little bit of a reach and take Mike Hoffman here. Has a potential of filling both my left wing and right wing positions. He has dual eligibility. And on a Florida team that has their top 6, they all have fantasy value, whether it's Dadonov, Trocheck, Huberdeau, those guys, they're going to score a lot of goals. They may not win a bunch of games, but they're still going to be competitive in both the NHL and fantasy purposes.
Yeah. And I think as we look, I talked, and I'm going to talk this up even though I know full well that I'm talking him up with the possibility that he'll get stolen. Nick Backstrom's still there, and this is what happens when you have the runs on positions, right? And especially center. Do not take center thinking like, I'm going to take this guy later, right? If you have a guy that you're thinking late in the draft is your sleeper. So if let's say I was like, who I really want to take late in this draft? I want to take Nick Backstrom. Don't take one early, right? Again, tiebreakers. There's a lot of decisions in your mind. Rarely in my draft am I looking at a guy and I'm like, that's 100% the guy I'm taking. It's weighing options, and that's one of those tiebreakers that you need to be looking at. If you want to take some centermen late in the draft, certainly, fill in your bench. You can I'd toss one on there maybe. And, if he makes it to me and Ben doesn't take him here, Nick Backstrom might just be that guy that I use to fill that bench spot. But Otherwise, do not think that it's going to work well for you if you've filled your roster with single position centers.
So, yeah, and that's the thing. So I've got the 105th pick. I lost out on Clayton Keller. That was the guy that I was going to take, and he unfortunately got taken right before I did. So I need some exposure to that Arizona team that I believe is going to surprise a lot of people. They're going to be the Buffalo Sabres of the West, even though they won on a streak. Out of the last 24 games last year, they won 21 of them, which is that's pretty remarkable, and I believe they're just going to grow. They did get better this offseason, and OEL is, I think, he could be in the running for the Norris, and that goes for both sides of the puck. The only downfall is that plus-minus, and it's not going to get it might get better from last year, minus 28. I think that was the worst he's had since he got drafted. So, and that's the category that, like I mentioned before earlier in the show, is something that gets overlooked, and you sort of have to spread it out, but you can take the good with the bad, and there's plenty of good here with him.
Yeah, for sure. And, looking at Arizona in general, that's a team that, with the injury to Ranta last year, there was a ton of questions on what he'll be able to do this year. And so coming into this year, if you have a healthy Ranta, that team's going to start to do better, and it helps a ton to obviously to have a top goaltender behind you, and so I think having him there, they'll be able to put their trust in him, and then go from him out and really improve what they're doing.
Yeah, and that's a big thing. It's build, and their core stayed the same for much of last year. And another guy that I wish he carried dual eligible positions was Derek Stepan, and that's the guy that. He quarterbacked that team, and like Clayton Keller, he's got a bunch of these young guys that are playing under him, and they're going to excel because he's been through it all. He's bounced around teams, and he's played with different systems, some defensive, some offensive, and it'll be interesting to see what they do. I hope they blow up, and I hope they are competitive this year because that team is young and they've got a lot of talent.
Absolutely, yeah. And, we saw it, obviously, preseason. It's very hard. I take things that happen in the preseason with a very big grain of salt. But we even saw last night, the production that they were starting to get out of Galchenyuk, whereas Max Domi is now suspended for the rest of the preseason. And then, that's its own set of ridiculousness. And so there's, a lot happening there. As Ben makes his pick, we will just talk about, this is kind of the part of the draft. We're down into round 12 of 16. And so, for most teams, you're filling your bench and you're filling your defense. What is your goal? So once you've filled your starting spots, what are you looking to put in your bench?
For me, well, I just had my 116th pick here, and I was going between either Dahlin or Ristolainen, and the only reason that tipped the scale towards Ristolainen was strictly hits. But to go back to what you were saying is guys that are these, I would say more dual category specialists, the guys that'll get you your hits, or the guys that say like your Thomas Vaneks, they're not going to score a whole bunch of goals on even strength, but when it comes to the power play, they're playing either one of the points alongside a defenseman, more your trigger men. So you're getting your shots and you're getting your power play points. They might not necessarily get you 40, 50 points a year, but when it is, the majority of their points are coming through the power play. That and maybe high flyers or like late flyers or trade bait. Something that they have that boom bust potential, because even if you draft them in the last, say 14, 15, 16 round, you can just drop them, and there's no harm done to your team.
Yeah, certainly. The flyer situation is one that you really want to be able to take advantage of, and that's going to be a hit or miss scenario, right? Who knows how much that's going to pay off for you, but that's something that you certainly want to do. For me, I'm looking at, and so positionally, I'm either going to I might take one goaltender, depending on what I got at the start. So if I trust my goalies, which with John Gibson, I'm a little skeptical. I might draft a third goalie here, but I'm not going to draft one that's going to get me a ton of issues. And so, and by issues I mean like save percentage. I'm okay if they don't get me wins. I want a guy who's not going to really tank my team. And so I'll do that. I will not be taking a defenseman. If there's one thing that I've had in previous experiences, Joel and I both have broken leagues. We've one of our favorite things is making leagues have to put new rules in place, and it's a rule that we enforce. And luckily, we haven't had too much issue with it in the fourth line league. But we say you always have to have a full starting lineup, and that's because we would usually, in a 4 defenseman system, we'd usually run approximately 2 defensemen, and that's in a non-weekly league. This year, we're going to be moving to weekly rosters in the fourth line league, and so for us, I'm not going to be taking defensemen. I'm just going to roll with what's there, especially if we're using a weekly roster. I'm not going to be moving too many defensemen in and out. The only time I'll be picking up that 5th defenseman is in case of injury.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's almost a waste of a spot unless you have 5 studs, like guys that you absolutely know are going to be playing power play without a doubt. And that's also a good tactic because it's why most of these leagues you only get 4 bench spots, so it's almost not. There's no point in slotting a defenseman in there unless you absolutely know you could get some value out of him through trade or either injury. But most of the time you're not drafting players that are injury prone. You sort of just like any fantasy sport, you don't want to take a risk, especially on your draft, to be wasting a pick for that. It just doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. So I've just filled out my defenseman spots, and I went for some guys who were going to give me some production, but also some hits. So I went with Jake Muzzin and Colton Parayko, a couple guys who Parayko is one that I always think will produce a little bit more than he does. There was a few years back where I just kept waiting on him to be the Colton Parayko that I was thinking he would be, and so but picking him at that spot, that's my 14th pick out of 16. He's a guy, as my last defenseman. If I do drop him, I don't expect to, but I'm not sad about it at this point. And he's going to fill a category for me. So he's going to get some production on the power play a little bit, but you're looking at those hits is the big reason why I went with him.
Yeah, I think Colton Parayko it's going to be, he's your number 2 guy out of there with Shattenkirk gone, and he's definitely solidified number 2 power play guy for sure. And he could be very well in the first pairing as well, along with Alex Pietrangelo. And that team, I think St. Louis is going to be one of the more improved teams out of the Central. And it all starts with the back end. I'm going to say that over and over. But these guys, you're shooting from the point, and if you have the possession, and that's a possessional-based team, they start most of their rush from the back end. The usage is there. He's going to be moving the puck. He is one of those defensemen that excels from moving the puck. So you're going to have that opportunity to get goals and assists from him.
Well, and especially if you with all the additions that St. Louis made this offseason, certainly Stastny gone, but you replaced him with O'Reilly. You've added, some auxiliary pieces around as well. St. Louis is a team that I expect big things from this year, just in general, but in fantasy, when you're looking at those top units, so if you're looking at, top power plays, with Shen there, with O'Reilly there, they've brought in a lot of pieces that offensively are going to help them. And so I'm looking for big things is really what Jake Allen does is what that team's going to do. But for fantasy sakes, especially if you're not playing with plus minus, that's irrelevant to a degree. If he's bad, then that doesn't hurt as much.
Yeah. And like we mentioned before, take this as a grain of salt, what we're saying, because your leagues may vary immensely to what we're drafting for. You might be playing in a banger league that has time on ice, penalties, and hits and whatnot, and with very minimal scoring categories. But you almost have to, if there's no plus minus, your picks could vary drastically. You could be taking these guys that they're gonna funnel the offense through. They might be minus 25 at the end of the season, but their value is still massive because they're still going to get their goals, they're still going to get their assists, and it all depends with your categories. You have to sort of plan around that. And so I've got 145th pick, and I'm going with the guy. He's aging, Corey Perry. I think that's a safe pick at this point. I think he's only one off the ADP. He's a 147 they have here, but I think Anaheim, he's still going to be getting your power play time. He may not play on the first line, depending on how they move and shuffle around their players, but the guy, he's produced. Last year he was hurt and he was sick for most of the season, so I think last year was an outlier. I think he's going to bounce back and have a better year than last year.
Yeah. No, that's a good pick. And again, that's your 15th pick.
Yeah.
If you drop Corey Perry, that's not going to hurt you. So for me, I'm coming up to my last 2 picks of the draft, and I'm sitting here looking at goaltenders, and there's 3 goalies. And, again, one of these can be dropped, but there are 3 goalies here who have the job. 2 aging, 1 hurt, Henrik Lundqvist, Roberto Luongo, and Corey Schneider. And to me, it comes down to which is going to give me the best opportunity to get some wins and to play the same. I look at these 3, and their odds of producing quality ratio stats, so goals against, save percentage, are pretty much the same. But Corey Schneider, for me, is going to give me that best chance for wins, mostly because I don't trust 40-year-old Roberto Luongo to stay healthy all year. So I went with him, and then for my last pick, I'm going to be taking. I'm going to see what's there for right wing, and it's looking like we've got some good choices. I'm going to go James Neal. He had, obviously the big year in Vegas last year. Coming to Calgary, he's going to be playing on that top unit alongside Monahan and Goudreau most likely, and that is something that obviously whether he puts up numbers, he will get production solely based off of being aligned with them.
Oh yeah, and I think when Neal gets moved, he benefits from it. He has these hot streaks. He's very streaky, but at the same time, multi-category guy. And Calgary's going to be better than last year. There's no way they even match their totals from last year. They were bad. Edmonton is bad. Let's just say I would say the bottom half of the Pacific was downright awful. And I think it's going to be a lot stronger division this year. There's going to be these guys like that. And the fact is, you could drop him, but very well he could be streaky, and he might be a guy that you're worth holding on to. So my 156th pick, I've been taking this guy last year at all my drafts, 14th, 12th, 10th, JT Miller. I don't understand why this guy drops in drafts. If people, I don't know if they're drafting strictly off ADP, but he is exposed and playing in the best offense in hockey. And it just doesn't make any sense. It's mind-boggling.
Well, and I know we talked on the first episode of the fact that he is a guy that when he came to Tampa, he started to get an increase in production, and he is your beloved multi-eligibility guy. So we're finished our draft, we're done our teams. Obviously, everyone heard for the most part who we took with all of our picks. Was there anything that you think, in general, people can learn from? Doing their own mock. Obviously, do your own mocks if you want to get out there, try some strategies. Not every mock draft, if you just jump into a mock draft lobby, not every one is going to be as full or as committed to it as we had tonight with these guys. Shout out to all of them for joining us as well. But I would recommend, if you're not sure what to do, jump into some mock drafts, try out some strategies, see what you get. If you say, what happens if I take a goalie in the second round? Where does that leave me? I think especially if you're new to fantasy, that's the best way to kind of figure out what you're going to end up with as a team.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing on Yahoo. They have lobbies ready for you to go, and there was times last weekend where you could run 3 at a time, and you could try every different kind of strategy you pleased, and you could go through it. You could filter through the players from all your categories, or you could even make a league like this and fill it. I'm pretty sure you could just make fake accounts or just fill it and have it auto draft. It's good, especially if you're in money leagues, because lots of these guys, they'll do their extensive research, whether it comes down to just power play time or even tendencies or coaching changes, and it's a good thing to know. And don't make the common mistake lots of people do in drafts, specifically off what the rankings are. Do a little bit of your own research, and even you could look around. There's plenty of different sites out there that have their preseason rankings and then their pre-draft rankings, and they sort of garner this information from a wide variety of sites that'll actually give you some detailed information that you can find on some of these players.
Yeah, so and don't just use, certainly if you're drafting Yahoo, you're drafting ESPN, using the information in the pre-draft ranks that they have there are very good. But especially if you're drafting ESPN, I know they have some questionable ranks over there, which is why I choose Yahoo. But if you're looking at another team's sites to say, where do these guys have them, whether it be one of them or if you're going to some of these other fantasy hockey information sites, and there certainly exist out there, free, paid, you can get all the levels of help if you need. So that's hopefully this helped you get ready for your draft, kind of have a perspective, give you some ideas on where guys are going, what to look for in a draft, some of the trends of what's happening, and we hope to set you up well so that you can go win your league.
Yeah, and it's the little things. It's just fine-tuning, and things may change from here till regular season starts. Preseason nothing's guaranteed. Some of these guys, they experiment, and if it clicks, it works. And you gotta watch out for injuries. That's a big thing too. Is watch the injury tags on these players. Yahoo, I know, is extremely. They do the due diligence and update. They also have player notes for most of the players on a weekly or daily basis, especially during the regular season. So just do a little bit of homework, and even, like you said, if you can get in some early drafts too, even if they're free leagues, you can sort of see where some of these players are going, and that could very well change in 3-4 days. Absolutely.
And I guess one other thing to watch for, when you get out of your draft, there will be, whatever your league has for waiver times, 24, 48 hours until you can make a pickup. And there will be someone who's decided that they regret their choices. I will never use my waiver claim right out of the draft because I trust my choices. I don't think, what I did 2 days ago was not wrong. Trust myself. But someone will make a drop, and if that's a guy that you would have rather had, that's an easy way to get some moves, some freak reactions. Someone gets hurt in a preseason game, they're held out of a preseason game, they're moved to a different line. There's some overreaction there. So especially if you're drafting this weekend, there's still things that could change. Again, if you want to be a part of our Fourth Line Fantasy Podcast League, send us a DM on Twitter at Fourth Line Podcast, mail at thefourthlinepodcast.com, or Facebook.com/thefourthlinepodcast. Send us a message. Let us know. Some of the folks that were in our draft have already beat you all to the punch and have sent us messages saying why they should be in the league. Pretty convincing. Let us know why you're in the league. If we laugh, if we're impressed, if we, have pity on you, if you have a sob story to give us, what would be your go-to? What kind of things can they do to persuade Ben to put them in the league?
It could be endless. Just, give us a bio or a persona. Give us their background information for hockey, because the big thing about fantasy sports is someone that might be new to hockey or even fantasy in general, this is a good way to bring 2 and 2 together. So you watch hockey and you have this extra little incentive to sort of pay more attention, whether it's, say, you're a fan of one specific team. For me, it's the Oilers. But when I began playing fantasy, it made me more interested to follow teams from the East where I really had no interest. It'll help you garner or build up your knowledge more so as hockey in a whole rather than a single entity or a team.
Absolutely, yeah. So send those off to us. And until next time, good luck. If your draft is this week, good luck. And we will be doing our draft next Sunday, the 30th. And until then, we will be back with another fantasy episode.
Thank you.